The year is 1945. The world stands at a crossroads, emerging from the shadows of a devastating conflict. World War II has left its mark on the globe, reshaping borders, economies, and lives. The scars of war are etched deeply into the landscape and the hearts of the people. Germany, once a mighty power, lies in ruins. Its cities are reduced to rubble. Its people are left to pick up the pieces of a shattered nation. The Nazi regime, responsible for unimaginable atrocities, is defeated. The surrender of German forces marks the end of a dark chapter in human history. The cost of war, millions dead, cities destroyed, is a stark reminder of the horrors unleashed. The human toll is immeasurable, with countless lives lost and families torn apart. But from the ashes of conflict, a new struggle emerges, one that will shape the world for decades to come. The power vacuum left by the war sets the stage for a new kind of confrontation. Germany's ambition for European dominance had plunged the world into chaos. The quest for power and control led to widespread destruction and suffering. The Nazi ideology, built on hate and racial supremacy, led to genocide. Propaganda fueled a culture of fear and division, resulting in one of the darkest periods in history. The world witnessed the horrors of the Holocaust, a systematic extermination of Jews and other minorities. The liberation of concentration camps revealed the extent of the atrocities committed. The world vowed never again, yet the seeds of a new conflict were already being sown. The rebuilding process began, but the wounds of war would take generations to heal. The Allied victory brought an end to the Nazi regime. Germany was divided, a nation split into zones controlled by the victors. The United States, Great Britain, France, and the Soviet Union occupied different zones. Each power sought to impose its own vision for the future of Germany. Berlin, though located deep within the Soviet zone, was also divided. The city became a microcosm of the larger geopolitical struggle. This division, intended as a temporary measure, soon became a symbol of the growing rift between the West and the East. Berlin stood as a stark reminder of the ideological divide. The wartime alliance between the Soviet Union and the Western Allies began to crumble. The unity forged in the face of a common enemy gave way to suspicion and rivalry. The ideologies of communism and democracy stood in stark contrast. Each side believed in the superiority of its own system and sought to expand its influence. Mutual suspicion and distrust grew. The world watched as former allies became adversaries, each maneuvering for strategic advantage. The stage was set for a new kind of conflict. A Cold War fought not on traditional battlefields, but in the realms of ideology, espionage, and proxy wars. This was a war of influence where every action and reaction could tip the balance of power. The Cold War was not a war in the traditional sense. It was a period of intense rivalry and tension between two global superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, that lasted for nearly half a century. There were no massive armies clashing on open battlefields. Instead, the conflict manifested in various forms, including political, economic, and military standoffs. Instead, it was a global confrontation between two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. The world was essentially divided into two spheres of influence, with each superpower trying to expand its reach and ideology. Each possessed nuclear weapons, making direct conflict too dangerous to contemplate. The threat of mutual assured destruction kept both sides from engaging in a full-scale war. At the heart of the Cold War lay a fundamental clash of ideologies. This ideological battle was not just about territory, but about the very way societies should be organized and governed. The United States championed democracy and capitalism. They believed in a system where individuals had the freedom to vote, express their opinions, and engage in free market economic activities. The Soviet Union promoted communism, a system characterized by state control of the economy and a one-party political system. They believed this was the path to equality and social justice. Each superpower sought to spread its influence across the globe. This led to a series of proxy wars, espionage, and political maneuvering in various countries. The Soviet Union, led by Joseph Stalin, moved to install communist governments in Eastern Europe. This was part of their strategy to create a buffer zone against potential threats from the West. Countries like Poland, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia fell under Soviet control. These nations were forced to adopt communist systems, often against the will of their populations. This expansion alarmed the West, who saw it as a threat to their interests and the principles of freedom and democracy. The Western nations feared that the spread of communism would undermine their political and economic systems. The United States, under President Harry Truman, responded with the Truman Doctrine, pledging to support free peoples who are resisting attempted subjugation by armed minorities or by outside pressure. This was a clear signal that the US would take an active role in countering Soviet influence. This marked the beginning of the containment policy, aimed at preventing the further spread of communism. The policy led to significant American involvement in various regions, including Europe, Asia, and Latin America, as they sought to contain the influence of the Soviet Union and support allies who were resisting communist movements. Europe became the primary battleground of the Cold War. A metaphorical Iron Curtain descended across the continent, dividing East from West. Western Europe, aligned with the United States, formed the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, in 1949. This military alliance was a direct response to the perceived threat from the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union, in turn, established the Warsaw Pact in 1955. This alliance bound the Soviet Union and its satellite states in Eastern Europe into a military bloc. The division of Europe was complete, each side armed and wary, locked in a tense standoff. The Cold War was not confined to Europe. It became a global struggle, with both superpowers vying for influence in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. The competition extended to every sphere: economic, political, military, and even cultural. The world watched with bated breath, fearful of a nuclear confrontation that could end civilization. The threat of mutually assured destruction hung over humanity, a stark reminder of the high stakes of the Cold War. Section 4. Lifeline to Berlin, the airlift that defined a generation. In 1948, the Soviet Union attempted to force the Western Allies out of Berlin by blockading all land access to the city. This blockade was a strategic move by the Soviets, aiming to cut off all essential supplies and force the Allies to relinquish control of West Berlin. Berlin, though located deep within the Soviet-occupied zone of Germany, was also divided. The city was split into east and west, with the Western Allies controlling the western part and the Soviets controlling the eastern part. The Western Allies refused to abandon West Berlin, standing firm in their commitment to protect the city's residents and maintain their presence in this strategic location. And so began one of the most remarkable operations in history, the Berlin Airlift. For over a year, from June 1948 to May 1949, American and British planes ferried a constant stream of supplies to West Berlin. These planes flew day and night, in all weather conditions, to ensure that the people of West Berlin had what they needed to survive. Food, fuel, medicine, and even candy were airlifted into the city, providing not just the essentials for survival, but also a morale boost for the beleaguered residents, keeping its inhabitants alive and defiant in the face of Soviet pressure. The people of West Berlin showed incredible resilience and determination, refusing to be cowed by the Soviet blockade. Every few minutes, a plane landed at Tempelhof Airport, one of the main hubs for the airlift operations. A symbol of hope for the besieged city, Tempelhof became a beacon of hope and resilience, representing the unwavering support of the Western Allies. The Berlin Airlift was a logistical marvel and a propaganda victory for the West. It showcased the technological and organizational prowess of the Western Allies and their ability to overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges. It demonstrated the West's resolve to stand up to Soviet aggression and its commitment to the people of West Berlin. The airlift was a clear message to the Soviets that the Western Allies would not back down. The Soviets, unable to break the airlift without risking war, were forced to reconsider their strategy. The success of the airlift put immense pressure on the Soviet Union, highlighting their inability to control the situation, eventually lifted the blockade in 1949. The lifting of the blockade was a significant victory for the Western Allies and a turning point in the early Cold War. The Berlin Airlift solidified the division of Germany and Europe. It marked the beginning of a new era of geopolitical tension and the clear delineation of the Iron Curtain. It also highlighted the emerging realities of the Cold War, a war fought not with tanks and troops, but with ideology, economic pressure, and political maneuvering. The Berlin Airlift was a testament to the power of resolve and ingenuity in the face of adversity, setting the stage for the prolonged struggle between East and West. Section 5. Conflict on the Peninsula, the Korean War and Global Stakes. The Cold War turned hot in 1950 with the outbreak of the Korean War. Korea, divided after World War II, became a proxy battlefield for the superpowers. Communist North Korea, supported by the Soviet Union and China, invaded South Korea. The United States, under the banner of the United Nations, intervened to defend South Korea. The Korean War was a brutal conflict marked by intense fighting and heavy casualties. It also saw the first use of jet fighters in combat, a sign of the escalating technological advancements of warfare. The war raged for 3 years, ending in 1953 with an armistice that left Korea divided. The Korean War had profound implications for the Cold War. It confirmed that the rivalry between the superpowers could ignite into deadly conflicts far from their own shores. It also led to a massive military buildup in both the United States and the Soviet Union as each sought to deter the other from future aggression.